Right, so this is a twin trunk European hornbeam. This is a tree that's been in my collection for many years. It was one of my very first attempts at doing a twin trunk bonsai. Now, those of you that know anything about twin trunk bonsais, or at least planting two trees in the same tray, you can see the obvious mistake that I made as a very young novice bonsai practitioner. I planted the trees far too far apart. When you do like a mother and child, as they call it, when you have a large tree and a smaller tree, sometimes they call it father and son, depends who you listen to, you would normally plant both trees very close together. And so you'd have one small one and the mother or the parent tree would be looking after the younger tree. In my defence, I probably didn't know I was planting them too far apart at the time, and also looking at the root flare on this particular tree, I haven't taken it out of this pot for many years now. I probably couldn't get them very close together anyway, just because of the root mass. This tree, up until about 2 minutes ago, had a large root coming out of there, which had died off and rotted. So when I touched it, it snapped, so I've just cut it off completely. So bearing in mind it had a long root there, and these have got quite prominent roots coming out there, I probably couldn't get it much closer than that if I tried. But I've just had a quick look at it, and it's going to be a project for next year. I've noticed that on this side of the tree I've got this lovely scar, this natural shari that goes down the trunk, and there are no low branches on this side of the tree, and because it's very close to the edge of the pot, the roots are going to be close to the trunk anyway. So what I'm thinking of doing next year is taking them out of the pot, even just getting a saw. Let's say this is a saw, even just sawing it straight through like that, the root ball, so you separate it out into two separate trees, and then putting it into a larger training pot where I can put this tree close against this tree. So even if I have to angle it out, so for instance if this is the tree, if I can get the base into there, something like that, and have the tree coming this way. This one has already got a natural lean in it away that way, so that's going to be good. So this tree has got a slight kink in it here to lean it away. The top of the tree is going back into the main trunk, but I could always cut that off and start a new leader on that tree. So that's, as I say, a novice mistake that I made in just pure ignorance probably. I probably read about a mother and child tree, probably saw a picture, thought, oh, that's something I could do, I'll have a go. This is what I've had for 20 years or so. It's not a tree that I've given much attention to over that time. I haven't really styled it much. This particular tree has had quite a bit of dieback on it. It's lost that branch, it's lost this branch here, there's a big branch up here that it lost. So that's tended to suffer. So I think probably the position that I've had it sitting on the bench, this main tree has probably been shading it out a bit and it hasn't got the full sun that it needs. So next year I'm going to make a mental note that I put this facing the sun so that can get a nice boost from the sun's energy, and hopefully that'll put on a bit of growth next year. So it's got this very low branch down here, which will be, again, it's in the right place at the moment because this is the side I'm going to put against here. So that's going to give me a nice branch coming out this way. This branch is still flexible enough that can be moved around and trimmed into the right position. So I think when I put them together, it's going to make a far better bonsai than it is now. So all I'm going to do at the moment is just take off the ends of the branches. We'll leave 1 or 2 buds, and we'll leave enough for dieback in the winter as well. So I haven't done any work on this tree this year. In fact, probably 3 years I haven't really done any real work other than just to trim off some of the newest growth, and just to keep it into the sort of size it is now. So next year I'm going to devote some extra time and attention to this tree. I'm going to use all of the knowledge that I've gained over the last 30 years of doing this hobby to try and improve it. It may take a few years, but I've got nothing else to do. When you get into bonsais, they tend to become your life. You'll find it very hard to take holidays, purely for the fact you have to keep the trees watered. I'm fairly lucky because in the early days of me doing this hobby, I managed to get one of my brothers interested in doing it. So he has a collection of his own trees. Some of his are better than mine, which makes me a little bit envious. But we can say that about most people's collections. You go and see other people's trees, and there's at least a couple in their collections that you wish were yours. So it's just the nature of bonsai. There's always room for one more tree in anybody's collection. My partner keeps telling me I've got too many trees. I wouldn't have agreed with her a few years ago, but I'm starting to think that as I'm getting older, I have got a few too many trees. They have taken over the garden. Most of the garden, if you could see it now, all you would see would be bonsai trees, which was fine when I was living on my own. I didn't have anybody else to worry about, but now I've got a partner. She needs her fair share of my time and effort, so perhaps I'll have to get rid of some of the trees. Who knows? We'll see. I've never sold any trees in the past, never wanted to. The only one that I did sell was I sold it to a friend at work. He went away on 2 weeks holiday, didn't get anybody to water it, even though I offered to water it for him. And when he came back from holiday, the tree was dead. I asked him about it about a month later, how it was growing, how it was, and he told me the story that he went on holiday, nobody watered it for him, and so when he came back it was dead. So that put me off selling trees right from that moment to this, because it was only a relatively small tree, but I'd spent at least 5 years looking after it and nurturing it and giving it all the love and attention that I could. He'd only owned it for about 3 weeks, went away on holiday, came back and the tree was dead. So that put me off selling bonsais. My brother over the years has always said we ought to set our own bonsai business up. But the trouble is I get too attached to the trees. Once I've worked on them for a couple of weeks, I can't ever see myself getting rid of any trees. I've never wanted to own my own business, so that's one of the reasons I never did it, and now it's probably too late to even start it. But I think if COVID would have kicked in 20 years ago, I think that might well have been the impetus to start my own business, because at the moment It's going to be touch and go as to whether I've got a job at the end of COVID. It may be that I have to sell the trees just to make a bit of a living, but we will see. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but you never know. Life has a way of turning around and turning out exactly how you didn't think it would do. So, right, that's okay for now, I think. That one's going back the other way, so we'll get rid of that. This particular, or both of these trees, they actually twist and turn all on their own. So one of the reasons I haven't done much work on it is, if you can see this branch here, all of this twisting and turning is absolutely natural. It's had no wire on it. I've never wired this tree in all the time I've had it. It just naturally twists and turns and goes in whichever direction it wants. And so that's what I let it do. If it wants to go to the left, backwards, forwards, up, down, whichever way it wants to go, I just let it go. And then when I come to prune it like I have now, I just prune off the pieces that I don't like the look of. In fact, I've just seen that piece there. I've already pruned it, but that's not doing any good, so that can come off. So yeah, look out for this tree next year. It's going to have a drastic redesign. It won't look anything like it looks now, hopefully, when it's finished. It's going to look, should hopefully look far better than it looks now. I've got another decision. I think I'll take that branch off because it's crossing under the other one. There we go. That can take its place around there. That gives me a far better taper and distribution of branches. I'll wire that next year though. So that's all I'm going to do for this one today. So it's just a quick one, just to show you an error or a lack of judgment or whatever you want to call it. It was just inexperience at the time. Let's take that off as well. So these are the things you need to look for. So it's just two straight up and down trees at the moment, but when I repot it next year, hopefully it's going to look a lot better. So that's that one. That's the European hornbeam. It's starting to get its autumn colours, as you can see. All the leaves are starting to die off. It's getting to that time of year now. So in a few weeks' time, all of my deciduous trees are going to be bare. They're going to start then going to dormancy. And once they've done that, they can be put away for the winter. I store some in the garden shed, I store some in the greenhouse, I store some in the garage. I've got a little lean-to area where I store them under as well. Some of them go under the benches. I've got a couple of polytunnels where they go in. So, especially if you get a hard winter, all the delicate trees go into the polytunnels. And that keeps all the snow and ice off them. Hopefully keeps most of the frost away as well. I do get 2 or 3 trees that probably die off during the winter normally. It can be that they've been put into a draft that I haven't noticed, or they haven't got watered enough. That's one of the things that people fail to realise when they first start doing bonsai, especially with deciduous trees. When they go completely bare, they look like they're dead, and people forget to water them. But if you don't water a tree in the winter for a couple of months, the chances are you are going to kill it. So even if you water a tree once a month through the winter time, that's what you need to do. Come out, test the soil. If the soil's damp, it should be fine. If it's bone dry, then it obviously needs water. I tend to try and water in the first thing in the morning, because if you get a frost, especially at night, if I come home from work at night and then I water the trees, they've only had an hour or two before the nighttime temperatures start to drop, and if we get a frost during the night, the tree hasn't had enough time to take up the water. It's still in the roots mainly, and what can happen is that the water will freeze overnight, and it not only freezes in the pot, it freezes in the root as well, so the roots can just burst open, and once that's happened, then the tree will definitely die. You might get away with it if it only happens once in the year, depending on how many roots are affected. But if it happens more than once in a year, that you've let the root ball freeze overnight because you've just watered them, then you're asking for trouble. I always look at the weather forecast the day before I think I might want to water the trees. Luckily we get a 5-day forecast in England, so if I think I'm going to water them at the weekend or at the beginning of the week or whatever, I can see what the 5-day forecast is, check that there's not going to be 2 or 3 days without any frost. That gives me my window to actually water the trees. So over the years I have had disasters where I've killed trees through the winter time, again purely through not having enough knowledge at the time, thinking you're doing the right thing for the tree. You check a tree after say about a month and you think it's okay. You check it a couple of weeks later and you think, oh no, it's going to need water. So you water it, you forget about it. The next night or something you get a sharp frost, it goes down to -5 or something like that, and next thing you know you've killed the tree. Hopefully none of that happens to any of my trees this year. You never know, depends how bad the winter is. If we get a nice mild winter, they should all come through nice and easy. I might not need to put any or too many of them into undercover. I have left trees out all year long and they've been covered in snow and they've survived. It just depends what you want to do with your trees, really. I have some very expensive trees in my collection which I will do everything to try and protect during the winter. I have some very expensive pots as well, which I don't tend to leave out so they don't get frosted and they don't crack. I have about 5 pots that are very expensive and there's no way I'll be able to replace them if they do get cracked. I've never seen them on sale since the day I bought them. I've bought them from about 3 different places and I've never ever seen them come back in stock again. One of these days I'll take the video camera around by hand and show you the pots and tell you how expensive they were, and you can see the reason why I don't want to run the risk of frost getting on them and them breaking. So that's all I'm doing today. So hope you enjoyed that little bit of information there, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.